didn't grow up in a very loving home. In fact, I never saw my mom be affectionate with my dad. I never saw them. I saw fighting, but I didn't see "I love you." I heard my dad say it to my mom, but I never got the feeling that my mom really loved my dad. And so I brought that into the marriage. And Dan called me on it pretty early on. And I really had to do a lot of work to know how to receive love and then give it.
So you would say that you were an emotionally unavailable woman early on in your marriage. How would you say being an emotionally unavailable woman impacted
your marriage? It impacted my husband naturally because he didn't feel loved. He couldn't feel loved because I couldn't love. I didn't know how. I knew abuse and I knew how to serve, but I didn't know how to embrace him and love him. I knew his heart. I always knew he was a good man. But our behaviors were really crazy, out of control. There was everything in our marriage. There wasn't just one thing. We had total dysfunction, total breakdown. And that was the best thing that ever happened to us because then we had to get help. And once we were getting help, that's when things began to change. One of the things I recognized in early recovery is that I married Dan so he could take care of me. Yeah. That was his purpose in life. And I went to him and I was feeling so bad that I married him for that reason. And I apologized to him. And he said, "Don't feel too bad." And I said, "Why?" And he says, "Well, I married you for the same reason." That really made me mad.
At least you were honest. You know, it's interesting because today I see a lot of people sometimes who have this conversation about like, oh, men are selfish. They only think about themselves when it comes to relationships, or women are selfish and they only think about themselves. And I'm like, I think if both parties are being honest, most people come into a relationship for what they can get out of it. Like everybody, they may be looking for different reasons, but at the end of the day, it's like a man and a woman coming together aren't looking just for reasons to be selfless. Like they're usually getting something out of that dynamic. So it's like, can we just be honest about the fact that, yeah, there's maybe a little bit of selfishness on both ends. That's not to say that you don't learn to love each other more and learn to serve, but like you can't point the finger and also be guilty of the same thing. You know?
That good old remove the speck out of your eye before you try to go to somebody else.
Absolutely. So, okay, so let's moving on. I think you really, first of all, it was really interesting that you acknowledged being emotionally unavailable because so often today especially when I hear women talk about their ideal partner, usually the first thing that I hear is that like, oh, I want a man who is emotionally available. I want a man that can be there for me. I mean, I can't, I've lost track of the amount of times that I've heard women say that, but I've never really heard a woman stand up and say, I myself was the emotionally unavailable one. How would you say that women, because it can happen, but how would you say that women who are to a certain extent inherently emotional, how can they be raised to be emotionally unavailable? And how can they be aware if they themselves are emotionally unavailable women?
Wow, now that's a heavy question. Well, actually, I think I started to notice it that I didn't have normal emotions. If I was angry, I cried, but I didn't cry very often. I didn't know my own feelings, my own heart. I didn't know my motivations. And I remember in the beginning, as I began to really look at my side of the street, not his, I saw that I didn't know what I liked, what I wanted, what I needed. And it took a long time. I think we've talked about this before.
Yeah.
You know, where do you go? I just want to go wherever you go.
Yeah.
Or somebody say, well, how you feel? And well, I'm okay. I remember waiting in the kitchen for Dan to walk in the back door and waiting to see what his face looked like. So I knew how I felt today. And so I was just mirroring other people and not knowing my own heart, my own self.
Very interesting.
Did I answer the question?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, basically, you weren't in touch with yourself, and you're saying that went in and it impacted your husband, even though you were serving him,
Right.
You were doing what was modeled to him. He still, something about the marriage to him still felt like it was incomplete because you weren't availing yourself to him as a woman.
Right.
Yeah, that's
and
really
it would make him angry because he wanted that whole partner, and I liked his emotions. I mean, like, oh, look at, he loves me. I mean, he would do so many things to show me that he loved me. And all I could do were acts of service back. I didn't want to be affectionate. I didn't really like it when he was affectionate. It was like very unfair at the time. I was a victim and he was the bad one. And so that's how I perceived things happening. And then as I got healthier and said, oh boy, I have a 50% responsibility in this marriage. It's not him being bad. It's him even lacking the love that he really needed.
Wow, that's so, like I said, that's so interesting because I oftentimes don't hear women talk about how they can be emotionally unavailable and how that can actually impact the relationship.
Well, you can have all your friends, you know, we do that with our relationships with other women.
Yeah, true.
And we will disclose and tell people how we feel, and yet the person you're supposed to be telling is right next to you. And it's easy to have relationships with other women. Boy, come along to have a relationship with a man. It's kind of a different story.
Yeah, totally different.